Hello, 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 and welcome back to another BBA case study. I'm delighted to be joined by Neil Turner, the UK Technical Sales Manager for Ecological. Neil, how are you doing?
Yep, I'm perfectly fine. Very busy in the construction industry, actually. Ever since lockdown, actually, since the government said it was important that we carried on building, the industry's been very buoyant for the last 2 to 3 years.
Well, that's good news for everybody involved and the UK in general. Okay, so let's start with a brief introduction. Neil, introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name's Neil Turner. I've worked for Ecological Building Systems now for 6 years. I'm a bit strange, really, because my education background is science. So I did a chemistry degree, but when I got to 30 years old, I had a career change and I went into construction. So most of my experience in construction is manufacturing natural insulation products such as cellulose. The product there is called warm cell. It's made from recycled paper. And we also got, well, I was involved in getting BBA certificates for that product as well.
Mhm.
And then 6 years ago, I joined Ecological Building Systems. So what we do as a business is that we supply a whole range of air tightness membranes, tapes, and seals, and also a whole range of sort of natural breathable insulation products, many of which are used not just in new build, but also in retrofit,
Okay.
sort of doing retrofit of existing buildings, whether they be solid stone or solid brick.
Mhm.
They're all classed as difficult to treat buildings. So it's not just new build that we work in, which is an important sector for us, but also retrofit, which is becoming, it's a very topical subject at the
Mm.
moment. Retrofitting homes, giving you better thermal comfort, and more importantly, is at the moment reduced heating bills.
Yeah, absolutely. Reduced heating bills, better quality of life. There's a lot of benefits to the whole retrofitting industry and what's going on there at the moment. So it's great that you're involved in that and the organisation's involved in it. So let's get a bit more specific now. What products are we talking about today in this case study then?
Okay, the main product today is the Pro Clima Intello Plus membrane. So this is it's what's known as an intelligent moisture vapor diffusion variable membrane.
Okay.
So in other words, it can change its performance depending on what the internal and external humidity and temperature conditions are. So what happens is in the winter, it's warm and dry inside because you've
Mhm.
got your heating on, and cold outside. So all of the vapor that you're developing, moisture vapor that generates internally, so what that could be breathing or cooking or having a bath or a shower, all of that moisture vapor is trying to escape from inside the building to outside the building. So what Intello Plus does in that scenario is that it slows down that moisture getting into your insulation zone at too quick a rate, such that you can get problems with condensation. So it stops condensation, if you like, in your
Mhm.
insulation zone. So it's protecting your building envelope against moisture and mold buildup. But then in the summer, what tends to happen is that the sort of heat from the sun, it's generally warmer outside than inside. And what happens in that scenario is that moisture vapor is trying to move from outside to inside.
Okay.
Now, if you were to use a sort of standard, let's say polythene type vapor control membrane, all that would happen, that moisture cannot escape back into the room. So you get sweating in your
Mm.
insulation zone, which again can cause problems. But what Intello does is that when it's in a higher moisture environment, it kind of opens up its structure and allows that moisture vapor to harmlessly come back into the room. And what it means is that you never ever get an excessive buildup of moisture in your building envelope. So not only is it giving you good air tightness, it's stopping heat escaping through gaps in your envelope. So
Mm.
effectively you're heating the outdoors. So it's preventing that from happening. But it's also managing the moisture dynamic in your building.
Okay.
So
So
it's
the There's a fair few benefits there, absolutely, in terms of the homeowner and the comfort, and like you were saying, the moisture transition and making sure that there's no issues internally, regardless of the season. But why is this an important product for the construction industry in general?
It's important on a number of different levels. First of all, you can lose a hell of a lot of heat from your building if you have what we call a leaky envelope. So if you seal the building with the Pro Clima Intello Plus internally, you can actually significantly reduce heat loss through air permeability and air leakage. And you can also prevent cold air coming in through your envelope as well. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that the biggest problems that you have with buildings, you can have a number of issues with buildings. Some of them are structural. In very extreme cases, you can have issues with things like fire. But by far and away, the biggest problem in buildings is moisture and mould and interstitial condensation. So what the Intello Plus does, and you can demonstrate this as well via calculation and case study experience. It's giving you a combination of air tightness, but also managing this moisture. So it's very, very important. The other thing about the Intello Plus is that it's also very good at controlling moisture during the construction phase.
Okay.
What tends to happen on building sites, new building sites, people are always up against the clock in terms of build program. So what very often happens is companies will install things like insulation before they've actually made the building weathertight. So you get damp insulation. And it's very important that you're not trapping that in the sort of during construction moisture in your building envelope. And Intello Plus has this property, it's called hydrosafe. Okay. So at a certain internal temperature, a typical internal temperature and humidity during construction, the Intello Plus has a moisture vapor resistance, which is kind of allowing moisture to come back into the building or moisture to go out of the building during construction. So it's got quite a lot of unique properties, not just for the completed building, but also during construction.
Okay, so it's got all these unique properties. It's got a lot of benefits for individual homeowners and the construction industry in general. So what led to the requirements of a BBA Agrément Certification being needed?
Well, there's a number of things. The first thing to say is that I have a lot of experience of exporting insulation. So I've got certification in Germany and France and various other countries for insulation. And all of these sort of government bodies, the first question they ask you is, well, you're from the UK, is your product BBA certified? And when you ask them, you say, well, why would you ask that? And they say, well, the BBA is recognized globally, not just in the UK or in Europe, but globally as one of the top technical third-party notification bodies. So basically, if you get a BBA certification, the product's put under so much scrutiny by the BBA that if it can be certified, then it gives your product a lot of kudos in the market. It also gives a lot of comfort to the builder or the client that they're using a proper, fit-for-purpose product. Yeah. The other benefit of BBA, of course, is the NHBC, the National House Building Council, that they're a big insurer of new buildings. And obviously, they're involved in the BBA certification process. So, obviously, in order to get the certificate, it's always good if the NHBC who sit on your technical committee can also endorse the product. So it's giving again a lot of kudos for some of the larger house builders. In other words, it makes your product insurable.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's always a benefit when you can insure things,
Yeah.
particularly major things in life. So, how and where is this product being used? Have you got any examples? Is it UK wide, global wide? What's the reach, and have you got any examples?
Well, Intello Plus is manufactured in Germany by Pro Clima International, or MOL GmbH as they're known.
Mm.
And they sell Pro Clima. They have distribution virtually all over the world where it's cold. So if you look at the US, Canada, all over Europe, but interestingly, it's also now starting to be sold in Australia and New Zealand. So it does have a global reach.
Mm-hmm.
One important sector I talked earlier about airtightness. Intello Plus is a passive house certified airtight component. So where people are looking to achieve really high levels of airtightness, whether it be passive house or BRE, Building Research Establishment Gold Standard, or there's a whole range of different standards.
Mm-hmm.
Pro Clima Intello Plus is used quite extensively. Probably the best example I can give you of a project was immediately after we got the BBA certificate for the Intello Plus. This is a project in Scotland, and it's a passive house consultant called Graham Drummond,
Mm-hmm.
and he built his own passive house. Passive house is a very highly insulated, airtight building, which has all of it, thermal bridges at junctions. You have high performing windows. You design the building so you can't get summer overheating, so you have to shade south facing windows and things like this. And it's becoming a big standard that's being adopted, especially in the public sector buildings, schools and other types of buildings like this. But Graham Drummond built his own home. It was called the Snug Within. It was a timber frame passive house. And it up until very recently, it was the most airtight building in the UK. It had an air permeability of 0.1 air changes per hour.
Okay.
A typical building may have an air permeability of anything between 5 and 10 air changes per hour. So basically, the Intello was used internally on the walls and on the roof as well. So if you go from outside in, he had some really nice timber cladding with a cavity. And then he used a Pro Clima wind-tight breather membrane. It's called Fronta WA. And then he had wood fiber insulation, Gutex Multitherm it's called, that's fixed to the outside of the timber studs. Then he used the natural insulation in between the studs. Then he used a breathable internal racking board. And then he fitted the Pro Clima Intello Plus. And then obviously there's a really good picture of the Intello Plus after it's been installed on our BBA certificate. And one thing I haven't mentioned as well about the benefit of BBA is it actually talks about the other components that you need to actually properly fit the membrane, install the membrane. So it talks about the Pro Clima tapes and other adhesives and seals and things for sealing pipe penetrations and window openings as well. So he used the Intello internally for his air tightness, but he also, had what we would call a breathable wall and a breathable roof. So he's combining the Intello Plus with natural breathable insulation products. Mm-hmm. So in other words, moisture vapor can easily escape externally, but then in the summer it can also escape internally.
Nice.
The other benefit of a BBA cert, of course, is that you can, whenever you acquire new certification, I mentioned passive house certification, you can also include that into your BBA cert. And another important application with Intello Plus is in flat roof structures.
Okay.
Where you have a waterproof membrane that's facing out to the weather. It's usually a sort of black coloured EPDM rubbery type membrane, something similar. And then using Intello internally can allow you to actually insulate in between the ceiling joists that are below the membrane and the deck, the plywood deck that sits on top. Now, obviously, the BBA and the NHBC, this is a new concept actually, but what was agreed is that as long as you calculate using this new moisture standard, it's called EN 15026, and you can use a software program called Woofy, and you can actually prove that the unique properties of this Intello can actually create a situation where you never get an excessive moisture buildup in that insulation zone. Before Intello came along, the only way you could safely insulate a flat roof was to have a very thick insulation on top of your timber joists.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's another benefit of this moisture vapor variable technology that the Intello Plus has.
It seems very flexible in application, which is always a good thing, regardless of the product. And some really interesting examples and case studies there that you've provided to highlight that case, which is great. I'm just going to move on to working with the BBA specifically. And first and foremost, I'd just like to ask why choose the BBA?
Well, obviously, if you're operating in the UK market, I mentioned the NHBC, who kind of ensure a very large number of new buildings in the UK. Mm-hmm. The other benefit as well, obviously, that there are some projects where you have other insurance providers who are looking to provide insurance-backed guarantees. So, because the BBA is recognised as being the one of the top third-party notification bodies, not just in the UK but in Europe and the rest of the world, it's very important that you certify these high-performing products using the BBA.
Yeah, that makes
sense. As I say, it's giving the client and the builder and everybody comfort that, if it's BBA certified, it's been rigorously scrutinized, tested. And also the important thing as well is BBA certs always give information, not just about how the properties of the product, but also how do you install them.
Yeah.
One of the problems in the UK is that there's a lot of really good products out there, but if they're not installed properly, then they're not really going to function the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it either highlights that in the certification, or it makes it abundantly clear that you need to seek the advice of the manufacturer when it comes to the installation, because, like you say, poor installation only leads one in one direction, and nobody wants to go in that direction. You mentioned the words rigorously scrutinized, I think, in your previous answer just then. So, what was your experience of working with the BBA like?
Yeah, but basically the way it works, it's a very straightforward process. You have to fill out an application form, and you have to talk about what are the sort of declared performance values of your products, and then you have to provide evidence of the data that you're claiming. So that could be from third-party accredited testing institutes. So if you say that your product has a reaction to fire of X, then you have to prove that that's the case. And if you have any gaps, the BBA also has facilities for performing those tests as well. And obviously, the other thing about the BBA certification process, which is really good, is that the BBA will actually audit the manufacturing factory as well, usually on an annual basis.
Yes, it's something that's not highly recognized by even clients of the BBA, that they do audit and inspection and management systems and just testing in general. So it's really interesting you pick up on that, because that is a huge point and part of the Agrément certification, or any certification. It's that auditing and making sure you are still doing what you said you would do.
Yeah. And the other benefit, of course, of the BBA, they also offer other services. So, you know, when I was actually manufacturing insulation, I use the BBA not just to control the product.
Mm.
They also provide services such as ISO 9001,
Yeah.
ISO 14001. So you could actually cover all of your factory certification with one company, rather than having to pay 3 or 4 separate companies for each individual type of certification that you had for your factory.
And that can actually reduce the amount of resource required as well, because I know there's certain elements that can be done over a number of days at the same time in tandem, rather than it being, like you said, using different companies that will come in on different days. That takes
Yeah,
time and resource away from what you're trying to do as a business, which is great.
yeah. And the other benefit of this, of course, is that, you know, let's say that some of the declared values that you have require different levels of scrutiny.
Hmm.
So let's say, you know, I remember once, rather than, let's say, when I had French certification, rather than a French person flying over and doing the sampling, because sometimes you have to have products sampled and sent over back to a laboratory for testing. Whenever you had the BBA doing their ISO 9000 audit, they could actually do the sampling.
Mm-hmm.
So they would label the bags and sign them and verify that you'd sent them off without tampering with them and things like that, you know.
Brilliant. Reduce friction, less on your mind, so you can focus
Yeah,
on business.
yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so let's start to wrap things up, Neil. Um, Final thoughts in terms of agreement certification. What does that mean to you, yourself, and the business in general?
Yeah, I think it's obviously it's always good. You know, very often you can give, you know, we do lots of presentations, Zoom presentations, CPDs with architects, and we're telling everybody, we're extolling all of the benefits of the products and services that we sell. But, you know, it's not, if you didn't have proper certification, people will always challenge what you're saying.
Mm,
Um, Whereas if you have the certification, then that takes away a lot of that, and it becomes a lot easier to convince people about the benefits of your products. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
The other thing about the BBA as well is that, you know, they can be very supportive. So we did a seminar, a tour of the UK 4 years ago to talk about the Intello Plus and other airtightness products. And the BBA actually sent a delegate, one of your colleagues, who actually, you know, gave a presentation. He was kind of updating people about what was happening in the BBA and some of the changes in regulations that you know, have occurred, whether it be reaction to fire or the new building regulations. So, you know, the BBA have also been very supportive in that respect as well.
fantastic, and that's part of what we're looking to do as a business, and that's provide people with the intel and information through webinars, through these case studies, through news, and everything else that we can do, and disseminate that information to make sure not just clients, but the wider community in construction know and understand what is going on, because that's a massive part of the construction industry in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Neil, thank you so much for joining me today. Absolute pleasure talking to you. Really interesting to find out about what you're up to, and look forward to seeing you soon, and some new innovative products coming out from Ecological Building Systems.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure, and thank you also.